I was invited to my sister's engagement dinner. Suddenly, my mother stood up and yelled, "Pay her wedding fund now $45,000. When I shook my head, she slapped me hard across the face. My sister snickered, "You're not even getting married. What do you need money for?" Then, my fiancé's mother slowly stood up. "Do you even know who she is?" Winter mornings in Boston are harsh. Elizabeth Grant had been up since early morning, sitting at her desk in her home office. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall silently, turning the Beacon Hills streetscape white. Her apartment, furnished with carefully selected minimal interiors, was refined and efficient, just like its owner. Taking a sip of coffee, Elizabeth was reviewing materials for today's meeting. As a senior manager in the Global Strategy Division, her opinions were valued. At least, that was her official title. Elizabeth had already built an impressive career, but only a handful of people knew the full extent of her success. The phone rang, her mother's name appearing on the screen. Elizabeth sighed softly before answering. "Good morning, Mother." "Elizabeth, I see you're awake. Today is Rachel's special day. You haven't forgotten, have you?" Barbara's voice carried its usual critical tone. "Of course I remember. We're meeting at 7, Elizabeth replied calmly. 6:30, to be precise. You're always so careless about time. And make sure you dress properly. Wear something feminine, not those overly simple suits you always wear." Elizabeth closed her eyes briefly. "All right, Mother." After hanging up, her eyes drifted to a photograph on her desk, a picture of her father, George. He had passed away 10 years ago, but his presence continued to have a profound influence on her life. Her father had confided his true plans only to her. It was his legacy, and it had become Elizabeth's mission. Later that afternoon, Elizabeth finished her last meeting at the office. Her colleagues praised her calm judgment and sharp insights. But none of them knew that she was more than just a department manager. "I'm leaving early today," she told her secretary, Jennifer. "I have a family matter to attend to." "How unusual for you to prioritize personal plans," Jennifer laughed. Elizabeth merely smiled. She was accustomed to keeping secrets. Back at home, Elizabeth took out a blue dress from her closet. This was what her mother would call feminine attire. While changing, her phone rang. This time it was from David Morrison, her fiancé. "Nervous about the family gathering tonight?" David's voice was warm and reassuring. "A little," she answered honestly. "Mother and Rachel will probably criticize my lifestyle, as usual." "You're a wonderful woman, Liz." "They'll realize that someday," David said. "Besides, it's our turn next." "My mother adores you." Carol Morrison. Thinking of that name made Elizabeth smile slightly. David's mother was a legendary figure in the industry. However, Elizabeth's family only knew her as David's mother. "Thank you," Elizabeth said. "I'll tell you all about it tomorrow." Dressed in the blue dress, Elizabeth left her apartment. On her way to the upscale restaurant, the Silver Fork, for the family gathering, her mind was filled with mixed emotions. When she arrived at the restaurant, her mother and sister were already seated. Barbara was a regular in high society circles, with a flashy yet refined sense of fashion. And Elizabeth's sister Rachel captivated many people with her beauty, inherited from her mother, and sociable personality. "Finally, you've arrived." Barbara looked at Elizabeth critically. "That blue is too dark for you. You should have chosen a brighter color." "Good evening, Mother," Elizabeth greeted calmly. "Sister, did you hear? Michael's father is the president of Harrison Real Estate," Rachel said excitedly. "Our wedding is going to be absolutely magnificent." Elizabeth smiled and offered her congratulations to Rachel. Michael Harrison and his family had not yet arrived. "You recently got engaged too, didn't you?" Barbara said. "What does that David fellow do?" "Some small IT company, isn't it?" "He's the vice president of Morrison Technology," Elizabeth replied briefly. "Never heard of it," Rachel sniffed. "Michael's father has been featured in Forbes." Elizabeth silently took a sip of water. Her relationship with David was based on genuine love. They had known each other since college, and he was one of the few people who knew her secret. "Rachel's future in-laws are arriving," Barbara said excitedly. "Elizabeth, don't talk about your work. Tonight is Rachel's night." Elizabeth nodded quietly. The Harrison family entered the luxurious private room of the Silver Fork. Michael was a fine young man, the son of real estate mogul Robert Harrison. Next to him was Mrs. Victoria, exuding refined elegance. Rachel rose excitedly and rushed to Michael. "Michael, You're finally here. Then she greeted the Harrisons with feigned sophistication but obvious delight. Barbara also stood up with a perfect smile and eagerly shook Victoria's hand. This is my sister, Elizabeth, Rachel introduced her somewhat reluctantly. Elizabeth rose quietly and greeted the Harrisons politely. What do you do for work? Robert Harrison showed interest. I work for a small company, Elizabeth answered vaguely. Feeling her mother's gaze, she changed the subject. This is a wonderful restaurant. A waiter poured champagne, and Robert Harrison proposed a toast to the happy future of the young couple. As everyone raised their glasses, Elizabeth's phone vibrated softly. She ignored it. It was probably about an important international deal, but tonight she had decided to set business aside. We're planning Rachel's wedding for June, Barbara led the conversation. I've booked an ocean view venue in Newport. We're thinking of a guest list of around 200 people. Wonderful, Victoria smiled graciously. We'll help in any way we can. Only the best for Rachel, Robert said in his deep voice. Don't worry about the expenses. Barbara's eyes lit up. How generous. But of course, we Grants will also do everything we can for our daughter's wedding. Elizabeth took a quiet sip of wine. She knew her mother was planning to dip into her savings for Rachel's wedding. Since her husband's death, Barbara had remained wealthy but could no longer afford the same luxuries as before. Elizabeth, I hear you recently got engaged too? Victoria inquired. Barbara cleared her throat and interrupted. Yes, well, in Elizabeth's case, it will be something more modest, I suppose. David and I don't want an extravagant wedding, Elizabeth replied quietly. We're thinking of something small but heartfelt. Modest indeed, Rachel smiled sarcastically. That's just like you, sister. Always plain and unremarkable. A moment of silence fell over the table. What kind of work does your sister do? Michael asked, trying to ease the awkwardness. Elizabeth works in some division of a global company, Barbara answered. But not in an important position. Elizabeth merely smiled. Her silence had become a habit over the years. By the time the main course arrived, Barbara was already on her third glass of wine. Her cheeks were flushed, and her voice had risen slightly. Elizabeth, I heard you recently got a promotion? Jennifer's mother told me. Elizabeth was a bit surprised. Yes, that's right. Just a bit more responsibility. But your salary increased too, didn't it? Barbara's eyes narrowed. Mother, let's not discuss this now, Elizabeth said quietly. Why not? We're family, Barbara raised her voice. It's only natural to use money for your family. Rachel's wedding is a special event. The Harrisons exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mother, Elizabeth said in a low voice. You've had too much to drink. Please calm down. I am perfectly calm. Barbara exclaimed. You're always just thinking about yourself. What about your contribution to the family? Can't you do anything for Rachel's special day? Rachel seemed to be enjoying the situation. Sister has always been locked in her own little world. She probably can't even comprehend that my wedding will be the wedding of the century. Not with your plain fiancé and a modest wedding, Rachel added maliciously. Elizabeth put down her fork. She couldn't tolerate David being insulted. But she controlled her emotions. Tonight was her sister's night. And the time for revealing the truth had not yet come. He is a wonderful person, Elizabeth said quietly. And marriage should be based on love, not extravagance. Love? Barbara snorted. Your father and I loved each other too. But he also had great ambitions. That's the Grant family tradition. Elizabeth pressed her lips together. Her mother knew nothing about her father's true legacy. By the time dessert was served, Barbara's wine glass had been refilled again. Her eyes were unfocused, and her voice had grown even louder. Money for Rachel's wedding. Barbara suddenly began. We want the best ceremony. Elizabeth, you should contribute as a member of the family. Elizabeth felt the tension rising. Even as the crème brûlée was served, the tension at the table didn't dissipate. Elizabeth broke the caramel surface with her spoon, and the small sound stood out in the silence. The Harrison family exchanged anxious glances, seemingly unsure how to respond to this unexpected family drama. This wedding will cost money, Barbara spoke again. Her words were slightly slurred from the wine. Rachel is a special daughter. I want to give her the ceremony she deserves. Mother, it's fine, Rachel said in a sweet voice. Michael's parents offered to help, remember? No. Barbara raised her voice. The Grant family has pride too. We can contribute to our daughter's wedding. Of course, Robert Harrison said in a gentle voice. We simply want to help. We certainly don't mean to impose. Elizabeth looked at her mother. Barbara's eyes reflected determination. She seemed to have made up her mind about something. Elizabeth, Barbara suddenly turned to her. You got a promotion recently, didn't you? Your salary must have increased. Living alone with no luxuries, you must be saving money. Mother, Elizabeth said quietly. This isn't the appropriate place or time for this discussion. Yes, it is. Barbara raised her voice. You've always kept your distance from the family, living in your own world. But this time is different. Glances from other tables in the restaurant began to turn their way. The waiters anxiously watched the situation. Barbara, let's calm down. Victoria tried to intervene gently. No, let her speak, Elizabeth said quietly. Mother needs to make clear what she wants to say. Barbara placed both hands on the table and stood up. Her eyes shone with passion, determination, and intoxication. Give me the money for your sister's wedding right now. $45,000. The room fell silent. The Harrisons were visibly disturbed, and Michael stared at the floor. Only Rachel wore a slight smile. Elizabeth took a deep breath and slowly put down her cutlery. Mother, she said in a calm but firm voice. That's impossible. Why? Barbara demanded. You must have enough money. I'd like you to respect my judgment on this. Elizabeth quietly shook her head. At that moment, Barbara's face contorted with anger. She stepped forward, walked around the table, and stood next to Elizabeth. And then, something unexpected happened. Barbara's hand cut through the air and struck Elizabeth's cheek forcefully. The sound of the slap echoed throughout the room. Elizabeth placed her hand on her cheek, a look of surprise on her face. A red handprint was forming. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain but from humiliation. Mother, Elizabeth exclaimed in shock. You are the worst sister. Barbara didn't back down, raising her voice. Refusing to help on the most important day of Rachel's life. The entire restaurant fell silent, with guests at adjacent tables watching frozen in place. Waiters went to call the manager. This is a family matter. Robert Harrison stood up and addressed the nearby customers. I apologize. Rachel stood up and positioned herself next to her mother. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. Sister, what are you saving your money for if you're not even getting married? Rachel said with a cold laugh. You and that, what's his name? David. Your immodest wedding won't even need a tenth of what mine will. Rachel, Michael grabbed her arm. Stop it. Why? Rachel shook off his arm. I'm just telling the truth. Sister has always been alone, working at her boring job, dating a boring man. And yet she won't help her family. Elizabeth sat in silence. Her lips were tightly pressed together, her eyes seemed to be looking at something distant. The redness on her cheek had not yet faded. My wedding with Michael will be the wedding of the century, Rachel continued. On such an important day, isn't it natural for a sister to contribute? Barbara turned to Elizabeth again. If your father were alive, how disappointed he would be. He did everything for his family. You are not his daughter. Those words cut deep into Elizabeth's heart. Still silent, she slowly folded her napkin and was about to stand up. Running away? Rachel taunted. Just like always. At that moment, the restaurant door opened and two people entered. David Morrison and his mother, Carol Morrison. David immediately seemed to understand the situation and hurried to Elizabeth. Liz, are you all right? He frowned upon seeing her reddened cheek. So you're David, Rachel said coldly. Sister's wonderfully fiancé. I'm sorry, but we're in the middle of a family discussion. Carol Morrison slowly stepped forward. She was a woman in her early 60s, wearing a simple but high-quality suit. Her demeanor carried an unmistakable dignity. I am Carol Morrison, she said in a calm but powerful voice. David's mother. We apologize for being late. Elizabeth told us about tonight's meeting. Barbara straightened her back, appearing a bit more composed. Carol, it's an honor to meet you. We're just having a bit of a tense family situation. Quite tense, from what I can see, Carol said calmly. She stared at Elizabeth's reddened cheek. What happened? She refuses to contribute money for her sister's wedding? Barbara raised her voice again. She's abandoning her family responsibilities. Carol looked at Elizabeth, seemingly searching for something in her eyes. Elizabeth nodded slightly and shrugged. Carol's expression changed. I was late because I had an important conference call, Carol said quietly. With New York and London. Elizabeth was supposed to join, but she prioritized this family gathering tonight. Barbara and Rachel wore confused expressions. Carol slowly stood up and positioned herself at the center of the room. Her eyes held the weight of what she was about to say. Do you? Carol's voice was quiet but filled with authority. Do you know who she really is? Carol Morrison's words echoed through the room, followed by silence. Barbara and Rachel exchanged confused glances. The Harrison family watched quietly as tension dominated the room. What do you mean? Barbara asked cautiously, seeming somewhat sobered. Who Elizabeth is? She's my daughter. A manager in some department of a global company. Carol smiled gracefully. She looked at Elizabeth and nodded slightly. Elizabeth sighed softly and slowly stood up. Mother, Rachel, Elizabeth said in a quiet voice. I've never told you the truth about where I work. What are you talking about? Rachel frowned. You've always. I am the owner and future CEO of Grand Industries. The color drained from Barbara's face. Rachel's mouth froze open. That's impossible. Barbara was at a loss for words. Grant Industries, your father. Yes, the company father founded, Elizabeth said calmly. Before he died, he entrusted the company to me. But according to his wishes, I was groomed as his successor in secret, so I could lead the company on my own merit. You're lying, Rachel said, half laughing. This is a joke, right? Sister has always been so modest. It is certainly not a joke, Carol Morrison said solemnly. I am the CEO of Morrison Technology. Elizabeth and I have been business partners for 10 years. She has become one of the most respected executives in the industry. Recognition dawned on Robert's face. Grant Industries, are you that Elizabeth Grant? The one they call the revolutionary of the tech industry? Elizabeth smiled modestly. I'm sometimes called that, yes. But, why did you hide it? Barbara asked in confusion. Her voice trembled, and she seemed completely sober now. That was Father's wish, Elizabeth said quietly. He wanted me to lead the company based on my own abilities. Not relying on family connections or the family name, but on pure merit. So I joined as a regular employee and gradually worked my way up. My first meeting with Carol was when I was still in middle management. Elizabeth smiled at Carol. She knew my true identity but never revealed it. Talent cannot be hidden, Carol said gracefully. Elizabeth's analytical skills and vision were outstanding. I would have valued her highly even without knowing her true identity. David took Elizabeth's hand. When we met in college, she was just a brilliant business student. I didn't learn about her true background until years after graduation. But Barbara still looked incredulous. Why do you live such a modest life? You could have. Because I don't work for the money, Elizabeth answered quietly. The true value of Grand Industries lies in creating products that improve people's lives. Father taught me that. Carol took a wine glass and began speaking again. Elizabeth donates millions of dollars to charity every year. Education, healthcare, environmental protection. Her foundation helps many people. And, Carol continued, she has been leading a major partnership with Morrison Technology. Our joint project will transform the industry. The contract is scheduled to be signed this week. But that's a multi-billion-dollar deal, Robert said in surprise. It was even reported on television news. Barbara sank deep into her chair. What have I done? Tears welled in her eyes. Rachel sat speechless. Her face showed embarrassment. Why didn't you tell us? Barbara finally asked. We're family. Elizabeth smiled a little sadly. After Father died, you showed no interest in my work. You never asked in detail about what I was doing at the company. You only criticized my modest life and plain career. But I always loved you, Elizabeth continued quietly. So I watched in silence. Waiting for you to recognize who I really am. Barbara covered her face with her hands. I'm so sorry for hurting you. What a terrible mother I've been. Sister. Rachel's voice was small and trembling. I'm sorry. Elizabeth slowly approached her mother and placed a hand on her shoulder. It's all right, Mother. Everyone makes mistakes. Tonight is a celebration of Rachel's engagement, Elizabeth said with a smile. Let's not forget that. But I slapped you. I said horrible things, Barbara said in a shaking voice. That's in the past, Elizabeth said gently. Let's make a fresh start. Michael looked at Rachel. His eyes reflected complex emotions. Rachel, your sister is an amazing person, he said quietly. Rachel nodded silently. For the first time, her eyes showed genuine respect for her sister. Elizabeth, Victoria Harrison spoke up. It's an honor to meet someone like you. I regret that our family's relationship began with such conflict. Life presents various challenges. Elizabeth smiled gracefully. Perhaps this is just a step toward strengthening our relationship. Elizabeth slowly stood up and took her glass. I work not for money, but to improve people's lives. Family can't be bought with money, she said quietly. Rachel, don't worry about your wedding expenses. I'll cover them completely. But I don't think it needs to be the wedding of the century. What truly matters is the love between you two, and the presence of those who celebrate it. Tears welled in Rachel's eyes. Sister. And, Michael. Elizabeth looked at him. Please take care of my sister. She has much to learn, but she has a kind heart. David stood next to Elizabeth and took her hand. Now we can invite everyone to our wedding too. He smiled. It will be modest but heartfelt. Elizabeth smiled back at David. Barbara and Rachel exchanged embarrassed glances. Standing before them was the true Elizabeth Grant, whom they had never really known until now. In a small church in the Boston suburbs, soft autumn sunlight streamed through the windows. Colorful autumn leaves could be seen outside, nature's beauty adorning the space. Elizabeth Grant, dressed in a simple white wedding dress, stood next to David Morrison. As the pastor's words quietly echoed, the two pledged their love to each other. In the front row of the church sat Barbara Grant. Her face showed a mixture of tears and pride. Next to her sat Rachel, watching her sister's happy appearance. 3 months had passed since that night. After the truth was revealed, the relationship within the Grant family had changed significantly. At first, Barbara and Rachel avoided contact with Elizabeth out of embarrassment and regret. But Elizabeth persistently continued to reach out to them. Rachel and Michael's relationship had also changed. The Harrison family accepted Rachel even after learning her sister's true identity, but what they wanted was not a shallow wedding of the century, but a sincere relationship. Rachel had much to learn. You look happy, Barbara said to Elizabeth during the reception after the ceremony. Elizabeth smiled. Yes, truly happy. I did terrible things to you, Barbara said quietly. That night, and over many years. Mother, Elizabeth took her mother's hand. Let's move forward. The past is the past. Rachel approached the two. Her expression had softened, no longer showing her former arrogance. It was a beautiful ceremony, she said sincerely. Simple, but deeply moving. Thank you, Elizabeth embraced her sister. After a moment's hesitation, Rachel continued. Michael and we've decided to postpone our wedding. Is something wrong? Elizabeth asked with concern. No, not at all, Rachel smiled. We felt we needed more time to know each other. And I've decided to enroll in business school. I want to work in Michael's company, but only after I've gained proper knowledge and experience. Surprise and joy colored Elizabeth's face. That's wonderful, Rachel. I've learned a lot from you, Rachel said quietly. The importance of combining strength with humility. David returned to Elizabeth's side. Next to him was his mother, Carol. The partnership between Grant Industries and Morrison Technology is a great success, Carol said with satisfaction. Elizabeth, your father would be proud. Thank you, Carol, Elizabeth said. But today, let's set work aside. As dusk approached, Elizabeth and David left the church, bid farewell by their guests. The simple ceremony reflected the essence of their relationship. Not based on extravagance or appearances, but on true love and respect. Before getting into the car, Elizabeth turned back to look at her family. Barbara, Rachel, and Carol standing beside them. She smiled from the heart. Family can't be bought with money, Elizabeth said quietly to David. True value lies in understanding and respecting each other. David squeezed her hand and replied, Your father would be proud of you. As the car drove away, Elizabeth waved through the window. Her life had entered a new chapter. The official inauguration ceremony as CEO of Grant Industries was scheduled for next week, but today was a special day for her not just as a business leader, but as a woman. As Barbara and Rachel waved back, they had finally begun to understand and respect Elizabeth's talent and dedication. True family bonds grow stronger when overcoming trials together.